Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Ground, good morning. Robinson 4060 Whiskey flight test for the antennas with Romeo.
Robinson 4060 Whiskey Torrance, ground cover taxi antenna site roof. Good morning.
To the antennas, thanks.
All right, still clear over here, bud.
All right, thank you.
Looking clear.
Thank you.
Upwind traffic there, and then what is there, a flight school right there? A bunch of those little things.
Sling, yeah, it's an LSA aircraft, and they have about 30 of them on the field.
Whiskey, clear 29 right at Charlie, taxi BSA.
They're doing good business, but it, as you can tell, is a little bit of a burden on air traffic.
International airport of these guys here.
So I don't know what they're going to give us here.
Well, winds seem pretty calm. Nice, beautiful day to fly.
It is beautiful. Let's see.
Zach, you'll be looking for traffic at out there as well?
Absolutely.
Torrance Tower, Robinson 4060 Whiskey at the antenna site for a West PCH departure when able.
Those are pretty cool little things.
Robinson 4060 Whiskey, West PCH departure approved, runway 29 left, clear for takeoff.
Crossing Alpha 29 left, clear to go for the West PCH 4060 Whiskey. Are you clear on final there?
Yep, final's clear.
Right, Ozzy, we're crossing Alpha. 29 left, clear to go. Beautiful day. I was hoping for a little less haze after that rain.
I was going to say, I thought it would kind of wash it out a little bit.
Yeah, but we're all right. Still beautiful.
All right, so I'm a little unfamiliar with the area.
Yep.
So we're in Torrance. We just took off from the Robinson factory. What's the lay of the land?
Okay, so we kind of along PCH here. Torrance actually extends out pretty far. So Torrance actually goes up, and there's actually a portion of the shoreline that actually is the city of Torrance.
Okay.
It's Torrance Beach. To the north of that, so everything north kind of PCH there, turns into Redondo Beach, and then after Redondo Beach, you get Hermosa Beach, Manhattan Beach, El Segundo, and then LAX, and then Marina del Rey, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's kind of, you know, in succession. That's what that looks like on the way up the shoreline.
Are you from this area?
I grew up actually inland slightly, in a town called Upland, California, which is like north of Ontario Airport, north of Chino, right along the foothills. But I've been in the Redondo or South Bay area for on and off. I had a 7-year stint where I left, but for about 15 years now. So this has kind of been my home.
So this is kind of your turf.
Yeah, this is absolutely my turf.
From the outside perspective, I've always thought, like, coming into LA.
Traffic 12 o'clock, 1 mile southbound, swing 2,400.
That's right. I've always kind of thought this idea of like LA would be a complicated place to fly, just with everything that's going on. Is that a true statement?
So
60 Whiskey, traffic about a half mile west of your position, swing 2,500 indicated southbound.
yeah, we do have that swing in sight. We'll maintain visual separation. Thanks, 60 Whiskey.
60 Whiskey, roger, frequency change approved, have a good flight.
We'll talk to you later. Thanks. So that being said, it's an interesting thing because I think there's a ton of benefit in flying in a complex airspace like this, because it is, right? I mean, there is a lot of traffic, as far as square miles goes. There's a pretty heavy amount of, even airports that are in close relationship to each other. So, the whole SoCal area is pretty condensed, and there's layers upon layers of different airspace, which, kind of can be challenging or even daunting as a new pilot.
Totally.
But kind of growing up and learning to fly in this area, it becomes pretty normal to operate in that kind of an environment. So when I travel and I go do training for, other people, throughout the country, it's very clear that is still a scary thing for them, right? So I think there's a bunch of benefit to grow up and fly in this environment. So yes, there is complicated pieces of it, but I think there's nothing but benefit to be able to operate within it.
Yeah, I think it would be cool to learn in this area too, because then like you're learning in the beehive.
Yep.
You're learning in something that's more complex. It's almost like the analogy of like when you learn in an R-22, you can pretty much get into anything and fly the helicopter. The R-22 is a great training platform because of that. What are we flying over right here? I mean, this is
Palos Verdes, right? So this is
gorgeous.
Actually Palos Verdes Estates, right? So there's a couple different broken up pieces within the whole Palos Verdes Peninsula. But Palos Verdes Estates, so that house right there, for example, that complex there is about $32 million on the market.
32 mil.
32 mil.
That's it?
On the market as we speak.
Look at that.
It's another very beautiful home. This coastline is very beautiful. This cove right here is Malaga Cove. It's was a very, very protected surf break for a very long time, which, led to some fights and whatnot. But anyways, super awesome and beautiful area to learn how to fly.
Yeah, this is so gorgeous. So I want to talk about your position, obviously what you're doing at Robinson at Flight Test, but I want to start further back.
Okay.
And kind of just get an idea of, where did you do your training and what's your career path been since learning how to fly and now ending up back at Robinson. And I'm really excited to hear about what you're currently doing at Robinson and kind of what that looks like.
Yeah, so I'll try to do this in some amount of brevity because, I could get pretty long-winded with my journey.
Hey, do your thing, man.
But, I started as most, civilian, I would get civilian people that want to, start participating in aviation. I, went and got my training and started, private commercial instrument, CFI, and I started flight instructing. And I was in a and this is going to be kind of an ongoing theme in my career, that I kind of was in the right place at the right time for a lot of it. There was a flight school that kind of got a bad rap, I think maybe rightfully so at the end there. But Silver State Helicopters, it was a big helicopters flight school that was growing rapidly, and I think it became slightly money hungry, and I think there was some bad behavior that went on there. But it was a flourishing flight school in Southern California that I was able to be part of, and not only the location where I started flying, which is in Chino, California, but also in Long Beach, where we opened a new location, and I was part of that opening and part of that whole kind of original staffing there. So what that did for me is it allowed me to have a very, very large student pool right from the beginning, which you could imagine, being handed basically like 16 students all at one time. You could work as much as you possibly
That's awesome.
needed.
Yeah.
So with that satellite office being moved to Long Beach, I started as a flight instructor there. I kind of was in a ripe spot to meet people like Doug Tompkins, the original test pilot for Robinson, Tim Tucker, being kind of a mentor within that, kind of, teaching environment. And they were also the DPEs for that flight school, right? So they would come out and I would see them often and developed really good relationships with both of them. So I got an opportunity to kind of move into the chief position at that flight school, and really tried to take everything that they ever told me as being important and kind of apply it within that flight school environment. And, through their, mentoring, I was able to be pretty successful in that position. And then it came time to move on, to figure out something else. So I reached out to Doug and, asked him about, a possible position as a production flight test pilot at Robinson. And he put me in touch with the master himself, Frank Robinson, and I interviewed with him.
Nice.
And I was very lucky to gain a position at Robinson. So that was kind of my, kind of intro into the Robinson family and being part of that. And I stayed in that position, or I stayed, at Robinson for a little over 7 years, and grew in that position. I started as a production test pilot, as I mentioned, moving into doing more kind of small experimental flight tests. And that was right when the 66 was getting ripe in its certification process. So continued to move into, more and more responsibility in the experimental flight test world. And then started doing some of the critical flight testing, high altitude strain surveys and, helping define some of the high velocity diagram and stuff like that. And, was totally given that opportunity and totally mentored, and I learned so much over about a 5-year stint about flight testing and, the engineering that goes behind it and, all of the little, kind of nuances that you need to understand to do a good job as a flight test pilot. So a lot of homegrown, kind of stuff was going on there that really I sometimes take for granted, but you'll never. It's very hard to get that right.
I mean, it's very unique. Not very many opportunities come up for pilots to be able to be in a flight testing position like that.
Yeah. So I think a little element I didn't talk about that I think is very important is, I grew up in a very in a family. My dad was very mechanically inclined. We were building hot rods from the time I was super little, and building engines and welding and just fabrication in general. So like kind of that engineering intuition and building and how structures work and load paths and being able to understand a lot of that was kind of something I grew up around, and I was attracted to it, right? I was always attracted to it, and partially I was attracted to helicopters because it's a pretty awesome toy, right? I mean, think of like, you go to a 900 horsepower hot rod that does wheelies. Well, I mean, what beats that? Well, a helicopter beats that, right? So that's kind of how I got into that. But I'm also an A&P mechanic, so I also had the ability to, fully get into the guts of not only helicopters but fixed wing, and kind of have that side of things too. So that kind of also allowed Robinson to kind of lean on me for other stuff, right? So not only was I doing flight test work within Robinson, but I was also participating in being a subject matter expert for accidents, going back and making sure that, we could find continuity through all the controls and working in accident investigation alongside the NTSB. So I had a pretty heavy role within Robinson there for the last about, 3 to 5 years that I spent there. And I'm sure the question is going to come up, well, why'd you leave? You know what I mean? So I think at some point and this is just me, I mean, other people don't make this decision, but I felt like I needed to find some other stuff, go look and see what else was out there, right? So I took a 10-year hiatus. I left, and I call it a radical sabbatical, right? I went and took a little leave of absence. And, I went and did some other things that I wanted to do. And I was already participating in some of this, on the side slightly, and met some other really good mentors out there, all local to Southern California here.
Traffic, 1 o'clock.
Thank you so much. 60 Whiskey's been in the break while continuing eastbound 1,500. So, some other mentors. So, for example, I got to do some motion picture television stuff with a couple local companies here. I worked as a contractor for 2 different companies flying news in LA. I did a little bit of charter work. I did, so I was able to kind of like grow there. And then I had a some life changes that went on. I don't want to get into it too much, but I met a new partner, and she wanted to kind of move, so I was totally open to it. Just give it a try. I mean, it was that part of my life where I was like, let's go figure something out. So I moved up to Northern California. More opportunities presented themselves. I did a lot more motion picture television stuff up there. I did a lot of news flying up there. And then I kind of got the opportunity to go and, get into fighting some fires, man. I worked with some really good people, so I fought fires in the Eastern Sierra. Beautiful place, amazing opportunity. I had some 133 long line time prior from doing flight testing here, working for some other operators, so I was able to get carded fairly easy and get into that, which was another real piece that I really cherish as a opportunity and kind of a learning piece that helps me now in my current position. From there, I kind of went back into engineering. I really wanted to be back within engineering. And I started looking, and it was right at the time when the eVTOL companies started coming around, and I interviewed with Joby and some other companies like that early on. Didn't really find a good fit initially, but because of knowing people, I delivered a helicopter to a company, and they actually recruited me in doing, and they were a startup with some pretty wild ideas, but recruited me in, and I spent just over 4 years working with some of the smartest people, developing flight control laws, advanced technology, working with PhD guys. I was empowered by a gentleman that, I can't thank enough to lead a team and build something from scratch, all in the kind of GA light helicopter world, but, kind of applying advanced technologies and advanced techniques to get things done. System identification, designing initial systems to actuate aircraft, from scratch, all experimental, but safe with, amazing guys who, helped me get that done. So I spent a lot of time there. I poured my whole entire heart into it. But once again, it was time to make another change. So I started looking around, and it just felt right to try to get back home. So I talked to a couple of the key players at Robinson, and they were more than happy to know that I was looking, and they wanted me back pretty badly. So here I am. I'm back at Robinson, and not only did recently we got the horizontal stabilizer done. There's a new
traffic,
ship up here.
12 o'clock, got him.
Another 1 o'clock high as well.
Oh, thanks.
And 60 Whiskey is just coming up on Sunset Beach. We're southeastbound along the shoreline at 1,000. I got the 2 news ships parked up there in sight, and we're going to continue southeastbound.
Copy, thanks, man.
So a lot to unpack. I do want to rewind. Just
rewind to all those. I know you got it. You're going to have to.
If it's
give
good,
me
I love
some
it.
Granulation
no,
there. Yeah,
I love it. First and foremost, if you can remember.
Yeah.
What was the interview like sitting down with Frank Robinson? Just kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, so that was one of those moments, right, where you walk in and there's so much, you feel like you're in that position where there's just so much to lose that you're kind of in this, like, you're looking through a toilet paper tube. Like, I'll be honest, I just know that it was super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He asked me some super hard questions, and when I walked out of there, I was for sure, I for sure did not have a job.
Okay.
And then I saw Doug on the other side of the door, and he's all, yeah, you can start on, whatever. And I'm like, I had no idea. So it was, Frank Robinson was a legend, right? I mean, you look at this guy, you sit down with this guy, and, knowing how much other important stuff he had to do at the factory at that time, because he was fully participating, during the time that, I was interviewing. I mean, he was still the head of the whole show, was super humbling and scary at the same time. So It was just one of those things. He asked some hard questions. I gave the best answers I could, and somehow I squeaked through it.
That's
so
awesome.
That was my experience.
That's a cool thing because not many people can have that story.
Yeah.
That's a very unique thing and very cool. One of the things that I've noticed at my time here this week at Robinson is just this idea of we're not here for a long time in life, relatively, right? It's kind of like,
That's
I
the
think,
saying, you're here for a good time, just not a long time. Yeah.
Exactly. And it boggles me, because I have a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit myself, to look at what someone can do in the span of a lifetime. And for Frank, it was really a half a lifetime of when he started Robinson to what it is now. Walking around that factory, we did a time lapse where we drove a little cart through the factory with a time lapse. Zach, how long did it take to go through?
To drive through on the cart took 3.5 minutes.
Took 3.5 minutes to drive through this factory. And so to see that this person, with the help of many others, of course, was able in his lifetime, half of his lifetime, be able to create that. So I think that's really neat about Robinson. Obviously, also being patriotic. I love the idea that it's an American-based company.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's so incredible to see all the manufacturing that goes in. One of the things that you talked about was this idea of mentorship. You had some of Tim Tucker, your other flight test engineer, as mentors. What in this industry, a lot of our listeners are getting into the industry. They're new. They're learning. Just can you go a little bit deeper on what mentorship has meant to you and what that means? I think you have to be in the right place to receive mentorship too.
Yeah. So the thing, mentorship for me, this was never like something, and maybe I'm stubborn but I never really reached out for mentorship. It's not like I was ever like, let me try to network. That wasn't my style really, but when I saw something that I thought was important, I always gravitated towards it, right? So maybe once again, going back, I didn't really try to say, hey, you're my mentor, I look up to you. But I always showed that person, whoever it may be, that what they had was valuable in my own way and tried to just learn as much as I could from them, kind of just saying, hey, and trying to work with them and figure out how we can do business together some way. I mean, not involving money so much, but how can I hang out more? You know what I mean? And I bet you some of these people don't even realize they were my mentors, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the key there is that, you're learning and absorbing and doing all this thing from, kind of some of these industry leaders or just leaders in what you consider their field. And it's just all about making friends, man. It's all about, just being part of whatever it is and whoever it is with in a natural way, you know what I mean? Just participate. And sometimes it's hard to get there. It really is, you know what I mean? But, you got to kind of figure out a way to just be part of it. I mean, for an example, I was working with a really cool guy that I don't get to spend time with anymore. In getting in, from Robinson, all of kind of the training and some of the techniques that I became very good at. He wanted to bring that into maybe flying something like an AS350. Can we use some of those techniques and bring some of that teaching in there and show people a little different way? And, he brought me under his wing and we worked on stuff, and it was super cool to be able to apply that, to another aircraft, right? So since then I've done that many times, but that was another piece of mentorship where he was like, yeah, I'm willing to work with you. Let's do it. And I looked up to this guy like crazy, and he's asking me for advice to, go ahead and do some teaching. So, things like that, that mentorship to me was sort of like that, it was just, find somebody that you think is valuable and, befriend them and help them, and they'll help you. You know what I mean? It's a give and take for sure. So
relationships are important.
It's huge.
And, I mean, even last night, producer Zach and I went out to dinner. We met up with a guy named Sean Moretz. You might know him.
I know
actually
Sean Moretz. Yeah, he's Helinet now.
From your Silver State
Yeah,
days.
he's a Helinet chief now.
Sean was a DPE that I did a lot of my certificates with, and a guy that for me had always kind of felt like a mentor. Again, it was never like a clear established, hey, you're my mentor, but he was a guy that I could pick up the phone and say, hey, I have this opportunity. What do you think?
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. And 15 years later, we're out having dinner together, and we actually do some work together now.
Yeah.
We because of that relationship and his network, he comes into my sales business and is able to bring business, and it's kind of this full circle thing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, that's
we've
what
just
it's
been
about.
Working together for so long, so I think that's such a neat thing. So you had your first stint going into flight testing. At that time, how many flight hours? What was your helicopter experience when you first entered?
When I started, and I was, as far as a flight instructor goes, I was pretty high time coming away from flight instruction. I mean, I was like probably 22 to 2,500 hours.
That is quite a bit.
So I was kind of high time from that standpoint, which I think is the reason why Frank gave me a hard time, but then I ultimately got the job. That's not a requirement at the factory to become a production flight test pilot. You can learn production flight test, as long as, obviously you have to have a pretty good amount of time within Robinson's, but, that's kind of where I was. I was at the higher time of being a flight instructor. I mean, I kind of left as the chief of that Long Beach flight school. So, I feel like I did my proper amount of time. I really love flight instruction. Maybe not so much initial instruction. I really love advanced instruction.
Yeah.
I love watching people grow. I love,
Totally.
And I was tasked a lot, in my career as a flight test, as a flight instructor, with helping like the struggling students. And it's so neat to be able to find like what is that piece that's missing that's causing that person to just stall. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, that's the neat part of being able to see those breakthroughs with people real fast. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so we're just coming up on Laguna. I mean, there's some absolutely beautiful coves within this. That next one over there is called Shaw's Cove. Amazing scuba diving. Really nice beach access. Insane houses. Absolutely insane houses.
Like that view. Unreal.
I mean, how about this guy with his own island? I mean, he's got his own peninsula. Sorry.
That would be something.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful.
Golly, it's right on the cliff. I mean, I would almost be a little worried about I'd like to see the engineering report on on that erosion.
I'm sure it's not cheap to insure those beautiful homes.
Oh, yeah, look at that. The guy has a whole...
1,700 simulated, engine out, 1,000, Long Beach.
So when you get into flight testing, the first time, obviously, again, you had experience, 2,500 hours. You've been teaching probably advanced maneuvers and things like that. You're a good stick in the Robinson helicopter.
Yep.
That's important. But what was it like going into, I guess, first and foremost, what is like the definition of an OEM flight test pilot?
Yeah, so there's a couple different. So there's production flight test pilots, and then there's experimental flight test pilots. So to be an OEM, right, you have to follow what, a certain specification for how you intend to show that your aircraft is safe to deliver after production, right? So at Robinson, we call them, it's an RPS, Robinson production specifications, and it's a set of instructions that goes through the entire factory. And there's a piece of those instructions that lives with flight test, right? So as a production flight test pilot, you need to learn and live the RPS, and the RPS is certain maneuvers and certain loading conditions and certain amount of testing and verification that things work, that you need to become, intimately familiar with and can execute in a very clean way to ensure that the product that we are delivering is safe, it's rigged correctly, it flies correctly, and everything is functioning, as intended. So the first part of being that is just understanding, those, loading conditions, maneuvers, so that that what and how the aircraft is behaving is correct, right? Because you get into a Robinson helicopter, they all seem to fly pretty much the same, but there could be small nuances in there that actually are disqualifying things. Like, I mean, you may find them even in a field overhaul where things are not quite rigged correctly. There's just not quite as much control margin as there should be.
100%.
Right? There's all these little things, and as a production flight test pilot, you need to become ultimately aware of what those things are to do your job, right? So that's kind of your first step into flight testing, is really understanding what makes the Robinson helicopter correct in a sense.
And how much of that is just flying with your mentors at that time of really trying to understand the nuances? Because I'm guessing that some of that may not be felt, even though I have a fair amount of Robinson time.
Yeah.
That may not be something that I'm able to necessarily identify or experience.
It's definitely learned, right? So when you go, you'll get with an experienced flight test pilot, and they'll go in there and they'll just go through every maneuver. This is what you see. This is what you shouldn't see. You know what I mean? And it takes a while to get comfortable enough at some of these loading conditions for extreme aft CG at VNE, right? That's a thing where you're looking at forward control margin, right? Controllability of the aircraft. It's not a comfortable place to be for the first time, right?
I was going to say, I mean, there has to be some anxiety and some...
I mean, you're putting 40 pounds of lead on like the third or fourth bay of the tail boom back there,
gosh.
right?
Yeah.
With just you in there as a single pilot. So there's some things that are novel that, kind of are, but required, right, for you to determine that it's rigged correctly, and kind of the flying qualities are as they should be. And that can be based on many things, even, a slight misalignment of the vertical stabilizer could cause, some weird behavior in directional control that you just don't see unless you actually go out and do that flight testing.
So, we've, you talked about, you just kind of felt this need at some point to kind of maybe go and see what else was out there. I think we've all experienced that feeling before. And it's a scary feeling sometimes because it's nerve-wracking to have change.
Yeah.
But looking back and now kind of seeing your career from this perspective back at Robinson, how important was it that you did that?
Absolutely integral to what I do now. I mean, I couldn't. Just give me 1 second. I try.
Yep, you're fine. Oh, I got him inside.
60 Whiskey is Dana Point. We're headed eastbound at 1,000 feet. Have opposite direction traffic in sight. No factual material visual. Absolutely integral to being able to perform in the capacity that I do now. You know what I mean? Going out and being able to be in the operational environment, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, flying many different manufacturers' aircrafts, in different, kind of flight regimes. It's ultimately the most important thing I bring back to Robinson after I left is that experience that I had while I was gone. Not only in flying, but, I learned so much in systems and so much in, kind of other technologies that you wouldn't really get at an OEM, you know what I mean? Rapid development of flight control laws is like something that you're not going to get unless you're in a pretty wild environment. System identification in the frequency domain to actually, have a model to actually design your flight controls around, and how you got that. I mean, I'm so thankful for being able to have some of these experiences that I had when I was away. I'm also very thankful to be back, you know what I mean? Especially now, it's an exciting time at Robinson for sure, with some of the new stuff we have coming up, and the change in maybe guard with the new management, and stuff like that. So
what is that like from your perspective? I've had the opportunity to podcast with David, have dinner with David. I podcasted again with David. From my perspective, it seems like Robinson really won the lottery with his experience, with his background. What is it like for you in your position to have kind of the changing of the guard? What does that look like? What does it feel like?
Yeah, so for me, maybe I have a little bit of a unique perspective compared to employees and other members that have been there, the entire duration that I was gone, even for example, or even longer than me.
Coast Guard, you guys up on 2285?
In my perspective, it's super exciting to have a fresh breath come in, look at it from a different perspective, have a network added to the Robinson kind of company that just wasn't there before, so he brings a lot. David brings a whole lot to the table, and it's just going to be very exciting to see where that goes. I have no idea where that goes.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
But I do think there's multitudes of ways that it's a benefit to have like that fresh look. You know what I mean? So for me, it feels, of course, there's always a concern that hey, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Change is hard, change is scary.
It'll be very tough.
But I don't think there's really a downside. There's definitely going to be some growing pains, but I think it's going to all work out.
And in your department, how many other pilots are you? Because you're the top of the department, correct?
So I work kind of primarily only in experimental. I don't do too much production flying, and I'm the only experimental test pilot right now. There is no other experimental test pilot in my team. I have a flight test engineer, and now we have a head of flight test, and the head of flight test, another very interesting guy. I mean, head of academics for NTPS. I mean, this guy is another wealth of knowledge, and he's really going to kind of bring a new look into the flight test engineering side of things. So also exciting. I mean, super exciting to have him join us as well. So really, we're a pretty small department in engineering. Of course, we work right alongside the actual design engineers and the flight sciences guys. We work with everybody, but my department, if you segment it like that, is pretty small.
Now you have an A&P. Obviously, I see the importance of what you do and having that A&P background, that experience. For some of our listeners out there that may be kind of having the idea of going both routes, getting their pilot certificate, getting their A&P. I mean, I think it's great for future employment. Especially if you want to go and fly utility, being able to be a pilot and a mechanic. What's been your experience of kind of being that dual rated? Has it been frustrating in the past where you get pulled in one direction, but you kind of want to go in that? I mean, is there...
Well, I mean, it actually just gives you opportunity, right? I mean, the definition of being pulled is just what you allow, right? I mean, you don't have to do either or. It brings a little more responsibility, to be quite honest, but I think that is far less of a burden than how much you learn and how much more effective you're actually able to participate in your craft, right? I mean, having an intimate knowledge of the system that you're flying, it makes you just so much more equipped to deal with emergencies, so much 100%. More equipped to look in critical spots and understand why things fail, or if something is failing, being able to kind of let me turn this to medium. So I think having A&P is an absolute awesome thing to do if you can swing it, you know what I mean? And I would say do it in parallel if you can make it work, you know what I mean? Absolutely do it in parallel if you can make it work. But it is a lot of work, I'll be honest there.
And looking for the
obviously the new horizontal stabilizer has been a big topic, and it's been talked about a lot. I got to have kind of the intimate conversation with David on the engineering and design side. What was your involvement with the flight testing, and what does that look like? How long does it take? What are you doing with the aircraft to help show the FAA that this can be certified?
Yeah. So I actually came onto the project fairly late in the game, right? Which was good and bad, right? So, I didn't get to participate in the first flights of the horizontal stabilizer. But when I did come, I was then put in charge of, hey, Chris, we're getting close to TIA, which is the type inspection authorization, the final flight kind of with the FAA, and had to really go back and understand all the company flight testing that we did to satisfy the regulation and show compliance, right? So I kind of went back and did a lot of the flight testing that was done outside of course, first flight to be able to understand the characteristics and stuff, because I need to be able to intelligently talk about it. And if I find something I don't like, be able to bring that to a head as well. So what it looks like to certify something like that is, we're changing kind of a major aerodynamic component of the aircraft. So to be able to show that, there is no dynamic stability change other than what we were looking for, what we intended. There was no drastic change in controllability. There was no performance degradation, right? So you look at all these different things and you have to come up with the proper flight test to be able to determine that those things are true or not true. So, doing, hover controllability and making sure that the performance of the helicopter is still the same at altitude, for example. Does this thing hover at the same amount of power? You're putting a non-lifting surface right under the blade there. So you may think, well, hey, you're going to require more power to hover than you did before because you're fundamentally putting load on that thing, right?
Totally.
So it increases gross weight of the helicopter if you think of it that way. So it may increase the need for horsepower to be able to hover. Things like that, you know what I mean? And speed sweeps, throughout the range. Is there any behavior that changes the longitudinal stability of the aircraft? Is there anything that changes the directional stability even, right? With that, symmetrical now, is there some directional stability issue that we didn't see? So putting, all those tests together to show that that's, in fact, a no change or the change that we expected. And then on top of that, you have to show that structurally this system is going to withstand the life limits that you plan to apply to it. So, you got to look at going out and do strain surveys. So they put the strain gauges all over, and you kind of go out and do kind of maneuvers at the edge of the envelope to determine what the highest loads that are seen on that component. And that helps determine life limit as well. The stress guys go back and do their calculations and say, hey, in fact, yes, that's going to live up to the time that we expect it to with the proper margin that we build in for safety.
Something that I found fascinating at the safety course this week was I really like how they broke down the HV diagram.
Okay.
It's a diagram, obviously, that we've seen a million times. I understand it. I get it. But the way that they taught it in the course was they kind of showed us building the diagram. And I found it so fascinating. Like there was people like yourself that were actually out there.
Yeah, so there's elements of that, right? And within flight testing, you got to understand, this is not we don't go out, we're not like some macho, risky, like, that's not the type of flying we do. Everything we do is absolutely calculated. You know what to expect. You build up to every single test point. This isn't just go out cowboy style and just grip it and rip it. This is like, a calculated build-up approach. So even for HDV diagram, you come up with like kind of a very conservative set of parameters, high hover port, high speed point, low hover point, and you build up to it. You know what I mean? It may be built up in the way that you are very lightweight, you have wind first, whatever it is, to get to the ultimate, dimension of the diagram that you expect to publish. So it's a pretty boring process, to be quite honest. Yes, things can be exciting, but if they're exciting, you probably didn't do your job right.
Yeah.
You probably didn't do your job right. The more interesting part of that is that, when you work with the FAA to actually certify something like that, right? Now, right, you have kind of designed this HV diagram, and you're supposed to design it with the intent of the average pilot, right?
Yep.
And defining the average pilot is not always the easiest thing to do. I mean, you could, say the average pilot is a 1,000-hour private pilot. I don't know. That's, maybe that's one definition of a average pilot. You sit next to one of the professionals from the FAA, and you go out and you fly, and he's acting as the average pilot, and he is going to go. And he is going to perform those points on that HV diagram.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Sitting right where you are.
That's borderline terrifying.
And he is going to perform the points on the HV diagram. So, how good you do your job is highlighted pretty quickly, right? If you did your job correctly and you're conservative and you make sure that, you are actually considering the average pilot, you're not going to have an issue. But you are right on kind of the margin or the edge there of the envelope, because you are trying to maintain a certain level of performance, and you want the chart not to be so restrictive that people are kind of scared of it, if you will. A thing to remember about the HV diagram, though, is the HV diagram is based on climb power, right? So you look at the HV diagram and, you know, a lot of on the ground effect, hover maneuvers and stuff, you're sitting in the HV diagram. It's not actually the same dimension as you think it is because you're well under climb power. So all interesting stuff, but, you know, just to highlight that, you know, it's not as exciting as you would think it would be defining that thing, because there's so much buildup, so much understanding of the characteristics and the performance of the aircraft in those maneuvers. Yeah,
it's a really controlled environment. We're seeing a lot of aircraft kind of an idea of an aircraft pop up.
Yep.
It sounds like you've also kind of been in that industry.
Uh-huh.
With your perception of certification and what it takes to certify an aircraft, what do you, when you look at these other guys that are now coming to the table?
Yeah.
I had an interview with Jason.
Yep.
What do you think are some hurdles of certification, of trying to innovate like they're trying to do?
Yeah, so, you know, I think the hard part is the lack of kind of certification guidance, right? I mean, they're doing some novel stuff. A lot of guys are doing novel stuff, and there's really no certification basis that they're working towards. I mean, of course, it's evolving, the whole Part 23 thing and trying to pull in vertical lift and that. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. So I think a lot of the challenge is, you know, defining what you're going to use to show compliance. So then you see a lot of these special conditions, these equivalent level of safety kind of things published, issue papers. And dealing with those is a really, really hard thing, right? Because they go out for public comment. You're going to get a lot of feedback, and it takes a very, very long time. So I think some of these companies that, you know, are running on a kind of limited runway, even though their technology may be sound or may become sound, right? I think is what we're seeing, may become sound, just may not have the runway to be able to live through the life cycle of certification. Certification is it's a big piece of the puzzle, and, you know, you have to realize that, you know, people talk badly about the FAA a lot, but, you know, it's a pretty heavy burden to be able to put a stamp on something that is going to go into, you know, the public realm and possibly do harm, right? So, you know, I think everybody at the FAA does a really good job, you know, with the amount of responsibility that they're carrying on their shoulders.
This is beautiful, actually, up here.
Yeah, it's Black Star Canyon back here. Some really nice mountain biking out here as
well.
Ooh. Yeah.
Producer Zach and I are big fans of mountain biking.
Oh, yeah.
Certification, you know, I think that there's a narrative right now that maybe certification isn't that difficult.
Oh.
And it's like, no, certification and just the resources. It's not just the burden of the FAA and the responsibility, but just the limited resources. And because now there's all this vertical lift,
Caution.
3 feet tall.
Wire.
I'm going to fix that for us. I have the wire in sight. And
Caution. Wire.
You know, it's not super easy.
No, it's not super easy. And, you know, I think a lot of it, right? So part of my decision to move from my...
Wire.
Part of the decision to move from my last position was kind of that misunderstanding of what certification takes, right? If you don't understand, you know, how long certification is, and you're telling a story and a narrative, like you say, that is kind of not true, you end up getting yourself in a bad position because you're not planning for what is actually going to occur, right?
Yep.
So I think certification is probably the biggest hurdle for any of these new, you know, kind of aircrafts and propulsion systems that are out there.
One of the interesting parts of your job, which is unique than other piloting jobs, is your interaction with engineers. What is that relationship like?
It's one of my favorite things I do every day. Yeah, one of my favorite. Because the engineering perspective, the reason why this thing is the way it is truly based on the, you know, physics and, you know, material sciences and all that stuff. And that part is so, you know, growing up in that fabrication world and machining processes and you know, hardening and shop peening and all these different processes that go into why materials work and why they don't work and what materials to choose and, you know, what dimensions things should be. Man, that is the coolest part of it to me. I am not an engineer, maybe aspiring, but I think I do better as a pilot. But it's fascinating to me to be able to work with them, share my ideas with them, and then work out how we actually make that idea come to life. Man, it's the most rewarding thing you could possibly do. Absolutely rewarding.
It would be neat to kind of see and see it from that perspective.
Yeah.
How often do the engineers kind of come up with something, and then you as a pilot have to say, hey, I understand what you're doing, but from the pilot perspective, maybe that's not.
I mean, that's a daily occurrence, right? That's what we do. That
Yeah.
That is flight test. And I think some other, right? So Robinson is kind of unique in a way that engineering and flight tests are very close. It's not like this opposition. I think there's a lot of times where flight test becomes enemies of engineering.
Sure.
Because we're always shooting things down. It's not right. But I think there's a very holistic way to work with engineering to bring the kind of operational side of things to highlight that so that they actually engineer in the right way. And Robinson has a fair amount of engineers that also have some level of pilot certificate, right? So that also helps, right? They'll be like, hey, Chris, you said this, and I remember being in the helicopter, and the way I fly does this, and you're like, yeah, exactly. That's this explore that idea, and it really helps to have kind of engineers that have some level of experience there. I think you need to be careful also, because if you have engineers with too much gusto in their piloting skills, they make decisions based on their level of understanding, and maybe that's not always the right way to go. But anyways, that's kind of my thing. I love working with the engineers. They're some of my good friends that at the factory that I get to work with every day. Very intelligent guys that produce these aircraft. I mean, it's and we're unique at Robinson. It's a very tight niche, like small company, you know what I mean? And you feel that every day.
Yeah, that's kind of how we felt actually. Being here at the course this week is, again, you walk through the hangar, it's huge. Or excuse me, the factory, it's huge. And there's so many people.
Yep.
But yet it does have like this family, small business feel to it. I think Loretta, Mallory, Keith, you're now on your second stint. People have had tenure at this company.
It's insane. I mean, people have been 30 years at this company.
And that's nuts. Yeah. Dave, I think it was his name, gave us the factory tour.
Yeah.
38 years.
Yeah.
Direct report of Frank Robinson for I think he said 15 of that year.
Yeah.
So, just this pretty cool, even though it's such a big company, that it actually feels that way. And that's actually been something that's been really fun at coming to the course. Flight testing seems incredible. I think that this is such a cool job that you guys do, and it's such an important job. Essentially, you are on the front line of helping guys like me that fly the product day in and day out to get it to where it's at, which I think is really cool. I appreciate you taking the time. Just like that, the GoPro is about to die. I can't believe it. Already been almost an hour, so it's almost like what I was talking about Frank doing so much in his short life. You've accomplished so much in your time here, which is pretty cool. What are you excited for? What is the next, what does the rest of your career look like?
I mean, to be honest, I think with rejoining Robinson, I mean, I don't want to guarantee anything, but I mean, I could, retire working for Robinson. There's a lot of exciting stuff coming down the line. I think these new changes in management and new perspective is going to bring very exciting new things to Robinson. Possibly changes to the current fleet. Possibly new aircraft. I mean, I think there's so much work ahead of us. It's so exciting and I'm excited to be part of it. So that's kind of where I see myself like next, is just kind of really digging in and becoming kind of reintegrate myself into Robinson as a whole and continue participating as their experimental flight test pilot.
Yeah, I'm so excited. It seems like Robinson is kind of getting a second wind right now.
Yeah.
You guys have built an incredible foundation. You know how to certify aircraft. You've done that process, and so I'm very excited to see what's coming out in Robinson. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to fly with us. This is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are we right now?
So we're just coming up to Fullerton right now. So this is a 55 freeway, 91 freeway coming up to Fullerton, headed back westbound.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for chatting with us on the podcast, and can't wait to talk with you again.
Appreciate you guys taking the time as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. With 80 years of service under our belts, the helicopter industry continues to innovate. We're growing with new aircraft and technology coming to the flight line and hangar. The industry's association is changing too. Helicopter Association International, or HAI, is now VAI, Vertical Aviation International. VAI unites the industry and advocates for you. Visit verticalavi.org/benefits to see how joining VAI connects you with your vertical community. Together, let's power up.
Hey podcast listeners, my name is Halsey Schider and I'm the principal broker and owner of Helicopter. Helicopter is a new age, data-driven, helicopter-specific sales brokerage, bringing helicopter listings to new heights. At Helicopter, we utilize digital positioning, paid advertising, and our large network of industry professionals to move your helicopter quickly and efficiently. Unsure the value of your helicopter? Lucky for you, Helicopter offers a complimentary market evaluation. All you have to do is contact the team today. Are you ready to take your helicopter listing from Mayday to payday? Easy. Fill out the contact information below and a Helicopter pilot agent will reach out shortly. Helicopter. List it, sell it, done.